Remy, look at me. Look at me. You are going to sit there and tell me that what I am reading in these papers is a lie. You are going to open your mouth right now and tell me that my daughter, that Simi, that she is mine, that she came from you and me, that there was no swap, that you did not do what I think you did. Remy, your sister called me. Your own sister, Bose, called me. After 20 years, she called me and she told me everything. And Simi and Bose's daughter, Leka, they are in love, Remy. Our daughter is in love with our own blood cousin. And you are the reason. You did this. You sat in that hospital room 20 years ago when you made a choice that has destroyed everything. Tell me it isn't true. Please, just tell me it's not true.
Tell me it isn't true, Tunde begged. He was no longer shouting. He sounded like a man drowning slowly in shallow water. Please, just tell me it is not true. But Remy had carried this secret for 20 years, and silence by now was the only language she had left. But let me tell you how it all began. Ibadan in the early 2000s smelt like red dust and fried akara and the particular kind of ambition that only grows in people who have watched someone else succeed first. Remy Adeleke was 26 years old and the kind of beautiful that people noticed from across a crowded market. Tall, deep-skinned, with large, quiet eyes that made men feel she was listening to them even when she was thinking about something else entirely. She worked as a seamstress from a small shop near Dugbe Market, stitching asope for brides and altering agbada for men who wanted to look richer than they were. She was good at her work. She was careful with money. She had a plan. The plan was simple. Save enough to rent a proper shop, buy a better sewing machine, and build a business that would eventually mean she never had to depend on anyone for anything. What the plan did not include was Bose. Bose was Remy's younger sister by 3 years, and everything about her was louder than Remy. Her laugh, her clothes, her opinions, her relationships. Where Remy moved through the world carefully, Bose crashed through it joyfully, picking up admirers and opportunities and trouble in equal measure. Their mother, Mama Adeleke, a stout and practical woman who sold Ankara fabric at Bodija Market, had long ago accepted that her 2 daughters were opposite sides of the same coin. She loved them both. She worried about both. But if she was honest, and Mama Adeleke was always honest, sometimes painfully so, she worried about Remy more. That girl thinks too much, she told her neighbor Iyaseun once while pounding yam in the evening. She calculates everything. Love, friendship, everything. One day she will calculate herself into a corner and there will be no way out. Iyaseun had nodded the way neighbors nod when they agree but do not want to get involved in someone else's family business. The corner Mama Adeleke feared came wearing a name, Tunde Fashola. Tunde was 30 years old, an engineer with a government contract job that paid well enough for him to drive a neat Toyota Camry and rent a flat in a decent part of Ibadan. He was not flashy. He was not loud. He was the kind of man who fixed things when they broke and remembered what you told him 3 months ago and showed up when he said he would. Remy met him at a cousin's engagement party where he spent 40 minutes helping an elderly uncle find his misplaced walking stick before anyone else even noticed the uncle was struggling. That was the moment. Not a grand gesture, just a man being decent when no one was watching. They dated for 8 months. He was patient with her silences. She softened some of her sharp edges for him. By the time he brought his family to see hers, Mama Adeleke had already decided she liked him, and that was the only approval that mattered in the Adeleke household. Bose liked him too. She said so loudly at the introduction ceremony, clapping her hands and declaring that her sister had finally found someone worthy. Nobody read anything into it. Why would they? Bose said everything loudly. It was just her way. The wedding was modest but joyful. Remy wore a cream-colored iro and buba that she had sewn herself, every stitch placed with the kind of attention she gave only to things that mattered deeply. Tunde cried when he saw her walk in, and he did not even try to hide it, which made all the women in the room love him immediately. They settled into their flat in Bodija. Tunde went to work, Remy ran her shop. They ate dinner most evenings. They argued about small things, money, time, whose mother to visit first at Christmas, and resolved the arguments the way people who genuinely like each other do, with honesty, and sometimes with laughter. It was not a perfect marriage, but it was a real one, built on solid ground, or so Remy believed. The first crack appeared quietly. Bose visited often. This was normal. Bose was family. But somewhere in the second year of Remy's marriage, the visits began to feel different in a way Remy could not quite name. She would sit in their sitting room and watch Tunde with an attention that was slightly too focused. She would laugh at his jokes a half-second too eagerly. When he left the room, she would ask questions about him. How was work going? Was he happy? Did he talk about his colleagues? The kind of questions that could be explained as sisterly interest, but that left a faint unease in Remy's stomach that she pushed down firmly because she did not want to be the kind of wife who saw problems that were not there. Then the pregnancy announcements came. Remy announced hers first at 6 weeks, unable to contain the joy. The entire family celebrated. Tunde bought her a gold bracelet that she wore every day afterward. Mama Adeleke prayed over her for 20 minutes straight in the Yoruba that only came out when she felt things deeply. 2 weeks later, Bose announced that she, too, was pregnant. The family celebrated again. Of course they did. 2 pregnancies at the same time. What a blessing. Remy smiled at her sister's announcement and felt something she was deeply ashamed of, a small cold stone of resentment dropping into the middle of her happiness. She could not explain it. She did not want it. She pushed it down, the same way she pushed down everything else that frightened her. But the stone stayed. Bose's pregnancy was easier than Remy's. Bose glowed. She ate well. She gained weight in only the right places and complained about only the charming inconveniences of pregnancy, the funny cravings, the baby's kicks at midnight, the way her husband rubbed her feet every evening without being asked. Remy, on the other hand, struggled. Her blood pressure was elevated from month 4. The doctors put her on bed rest at month 7. She could not go to her shop. She could not sew. She lay in bed and listened to her sister's happy pregnancy reports on the phone and smiled and said the right things and felt the cold stone in her chest grow heavier each week. It was during those long bed rest evenings when Tunde was at a site meeting and the plat was very quiet that Remy let herself think the thought she had been refusing for months. What if something goes wrong with my baby? She did not know, lying there in the dim room with her hand on her swollen belly, that she had just asked the question that would change 4 lives forever. The hospitals were different, but the timing was cruel in its precision. Remy delivered at University College Hospital Ibadan, UCH, the big government hospital where the corridors smelled of disinfectant and prayers, and where the nurses moved with the tired efficiency of people who had seen too much to be surprised by anything. Remy delivered on a Tuesday evening. Tunde was there, holding her hand through contractions that felt like her body was trying to turn itself inside out. The midwife, a brisk woman named Sister Fumi, kept telling her to push and breathe and push again. And Remy pushed with everything she had, every ounce of strength from every dream she had ever carried. The baby came out silent. The silence lasted only a few seconds, less than 10, the doctor would say later, but Remy lived 20 years in those seconds. She watched Sister Fumi's face. She watched the doctor's hands. She saw the brief exchange of looks between them, the small movement of Sister Fumi's head, and she knew, the way mothers sometimes know things before they are told, that something was wrong. The baby was alive, but barely. A girl, small and grey-blue, and fighting for breath in a way that made her entire body ache. The doctors moved fast, speaking in the clipped technical language of people managing a crisis. They took the baby to the NICU. They told Tunde and Remy that their baby's condition was serious, a defect that had not shown clearly on any of the scans. They said words like surgical intervention and specialist review, and we will know more in 72 hours. Tunde held Remy's hand and did not let go. Remy lay in her hospital bed that first night and stared at the ceiling and felt the cold stone in her chest crack open into something much larger and much darker. Her baby was fighting for her life in a room 3 corridors away, and Remy could not go to her, could not hold her, could not do anything except lie still and feel completely, devastatingly helpless. Bose came to visit the next morning. She arrived carrying food from home, Mama Adeleke's pepper soup still warm in a flask, and she sat beside Remy's bed with red eyes that said she had been crying since she heard the news. She held Remy's hand, she prayed quietly, she said all the right things, and Remy looked at her sister's face, the same face she had known all her life, the face that had annoyed her and comforted her and made her laugh since childhood, and felt a wave of love for her, so strong it almost washed away everything else. Almost. "How is your own baby?" Remy asked. Bose smiled, and it was the smile of a woman who understood that she needed to be careful here, that her happiness needed to be handled gently in this room. "She is fine," she said softly, "healthy, strong. She cried the whole night. Tunde nearly lost his mind." She laughed a small laugh. Bose had a girl. Remy said nothing. She smiled back. She asked Bose to tell her more, and she listened. And somewhere behind her careful smile, her mind was doing something she would not be able to stop. A dark and desperate calculation that began with the question she had asked herself on that bed rest evening, and ended somewhere she had never intended to go. Her baby might not survive. Bose's baby was healthy and strong. The thought arrived fully formed, like it had been waiting for exactly this moment. Remy felt sick with herself for having it. She pushed it away. She focused on the pepper soup, on Bose's voice, on the sound of the hospital around her. But the thought came back that night, and the night after. On the 3rd day, the doctors told Remy and Tunde that their daughter's condition was critical. Without surgery, expensive surgery, the kind that would need to happen in Lagos or possibly abroad, the baby's chances were not good. They were not saying she would die, but they were not saying she would live either. Tunde left to make phone calls to his family, to the bank, to anyone who might help with the cost of the surgery. Remy lay alone. And on that 3rd day, in that quiet hospital room, she made the decision that would consume the rest of her life. She knew the layout of the hospital. She had been walking its corridors when the nurses allowed it, trying to keep her blood pressure manageable. She knew that Bose's baby, Bose had moved to UCHE on the 2nd day after a small complication that turned out to be nothing, a precaution only, was in a nursery 2 floors down. She knew the shift schedules, the way the night nurses clustered near the station between 2 and 4 in the morning, the way the nursery was quiet and dim in those hours. She told herself she was only going to look. She told herself she just wanted to see Bose's baby, to hold her for a moment, to feel what it felt like to hold a baby that was not fighting for its life. But when she walked into that dim nursery at 3 in the morning and stood between 2 small cribs, her daughter's name on one tag, Bose's daughter's name on the other, her hands were already moving before her mind gave them permission. it took less than 1 minute. The crime of Remi's life took less than 1 minute to commit. She switched the name tags. She stood there in the dark and looked at what she had done. Then she walked back to her room and lay down and stared at the ceiling and felt something she would carry for 20 years. Not quite guilt yet, because guilt requires distance, and she was still too close to it. But a cold, clear knowledge that she had just crossed a line that could never be uncrossed. The next morning, the doctors told her that her baby's condition had stabilized overnight. It was unexpected. It was, they said, a good sign. Remi accepted the news with tears she told herself were relief. She never corrected the name tags. Bose took home a baby she named Lekan, a name she and Kunle had chosen weeks earlier and loved, and raised her with everything she had. Remi took home the healthy baby and named her Simi, and loved her with a desperate, guilty, consuming love of a woman trying to outrun what she had done. And for a while, for a long, ordinary, domestic while, she almost managed it. The years passed the way years do when you are busy enough to not think. Simi grew into a bright, curious girl with Bose's wide forehead and Kunle's easy laugh, though Remi told herself these things meant nothing, that children absorbed traits from their environment, that she was imagining similarities that were not there. Tunde adored Simi. He coached her through primary school homework with the same patient focus he gave everything, built her a bookshelf when she started reading too much for her bedroom floor to hold, taught her to ride a bicycle in the compound on Saturday mornings while Remi watched from the window and felt the cold knowledge settle deeper into her bones each year. Bose's daughter, the child Remi had taken, who was raised as Lekan, grew up across town with Bose and Kunle. Remi saw her at family gatherings. She watched her grow. She told herself she did not feel anything specific when she looked at her, that she was just her niece, just Bose's child. But she always noticed. Always. The girls were alike in ways that had nothing to do with environment. The tilt of their heads when they were thinking, the specific way they both went quiet when they were angry rather than shouting, the shape of their hands. Remi noticed. She said nothing. Lekan and Simi grew up knowing each other the way cousins do, present at every Christmas, every burial, every naming ceremony, every celebration that pulled the family into the same compound. They were the same age, born days apart, and as small children, this made them natural playmates at every gathering. Two little girls in matching Ankara dresses that Mama Adeleke loved to buy them, inseparable at family events in the same way that same-age cousins often are. As teenagers, the closeness faded naturally, the way it does when young people develop their own separate lives, friend groups, and identities. Lekan attended a Lagos boarding school and came back to Ibadan only for holidays. Simi stayed in Ibadan for secondary school. They kept in touch but were not as close as they had been as small children. But at 19, when both of them were in Ibadan for the first time in years, Simi starting at the University of Ibadan, Lekan returning for her NYSC posting after her first degree in Lagos, something shifted. The shared age that had made them playmates as toddlers now made them companions in a different way. They were at the same life stage, facing the same questions, navigating the same transition from girlhood into womanhood. The closeness rebuilt itself quickly, naturally, on a whole new foundation. Not the forced proximity of family events, but chosen time, late phone calls, long walks around the UI campus, the kind of friendship that grows when two people discover they think about the world in remarkably similar ways. Remi heard about it from Tunde, who heard it from Bose, who reported it with the uncomplicated pleasure of a mother watching her daughter build a good friendship. Remi smiled and said it was lovely, and she pushed the cold stone down further, deeper into a place she told herself it could no longer reach. She was wrong. It was Tunde who saw them first. He had gone to drop Simi's textbooks at a cafe near UI where she had forgotten them, and he saw his daughter sitting across a small table from Lekan, both of them leaning forward in the particular way people lean when they are saying something private and important. He almost called out. Then he saw the way Simi looked at Lekan, and something in his chest went very still. He drove home without delivering the books. He said nothing to Remy that evening. He sat with it for 3 days, telling himself he had misread it, that father saw things that were not there when it came to their daughters, that a close friendship between cousins could look like many things from the outside. On the 4th day, Simi came home from campus with a light in her eyes that Tunde had never seen before, and she sat at dinner and talked about Lekan with a frequency and a warmth that removed the last of his doubt. He asked Simi directly 2 days later when Remy was at the shop. Simi, who had inherited Remy's quiet eyes and Tunde's directness, looked at her father for a long moment and then said, "Yes, Daddy, I think I love her. Not the way cousins love each other." Tunde sat very still for a very long time. "Does she feel the same?" he asked. "Yes." Another silence. "Does your mother know?" "Not yet." Tunde sent Simi back to campus that afternoon and told her he needed a few days to think. Then he sat in the sitting room and thought about what his daughter had just told him. And underneath the layers of the revelation, the question of what family would say, the question of how to handle this, was a different question, quieter and more unsettling that he could not fully name yet. Something did not fit. He could not say what. He only knew that a door had opened in his mind and a cold draft was coming through it. He called Bosse. He told himself he was calling to discuss the situation between Simi and Lekan, to figure out together how to handle it as a family. And they did discuss it. Bosse was shocked, then upset, then quietly devastated in the way parents are when they realize their child is heading into something painful. But it was something Bosse said near the end of the call, something she said carefully and quietly that changed everything. "Tunde," Bosse said, "there is something I should have told you a long time ago. I have been carrying it since those days in the hospital. I did not want to destroy your family. But now, with this happening between the children, I cannot keep it anymore." The silence on the line lasted a full minute. "Tell me," Tunde said, and Bosse told him. The yellow envelope arrived by courier the morning after Bosse's phone call. Inside it were documents Bosse had kept for 20 years, a hospital record she had quietly obtained years later when she began to suspect something was wrong, old photographs from those first hospital days, and a letter she had written to Remy 8 years ago and never sent. The letter simply said, "I know what you did. I do not know how to forgive you yet. I do not know if I will ever. But I cannot tell your husband because I love you and I am afraid of what it will do. So I will carry this, but know that I know." Tunde read the letter 3 times. Then he sat and waited for Remy to come home from the shop. Remy walked in at 6 p.m. carrying groceries and the ordinary tiredness of a workday. She saw Tunde standing in the middle of the sitting room with the yellow envelope on the floor and the documents scattered across the tile like evidence at a crime scene. Her legs kept moving. She put the groceries on the kitchen counter. She came back to the sitting room and sat on the sofa, and she waited, the way she had always known she would one day have to wait for it to finally arrive. "Remy, look at me. Look at me." Tunde's voice cracked like dry wood splitting in Hamatan. He was standing in the middle of the sitting room, his chest heaving, his hands shaking so badly he had to press them flat against his thighs to stop them. The yellow envelope he was holding was now on the floor. Its contents, hospital documents, old photographs, a single folded letter scattered across the tile like evidence at a crime scene. Remy sat on the sofa and said nothing. She had not moved since he walked in. She had not blinked. She looked like a woman who had been waiting 20 years for this exact moment and had rehearsed 1,000 responses, only to find that now that it was here, every word had left her body. Remy, you are going to sit there and tell me that what I am reading in these papers is a lie. You are going to open your mouth right now and tell me that my daughter, that Simi, that she is mine, that she came from you and me, that there was no swap, that you did not do what I think you did. Remy's lips moved. Nothing came out. Remy! The shout bounced off every wall in the house and died. Outside, a neighbor's generator hummed. A hawker called out in the street. Life continued the way it always does, indifferent to the moment a family is breaking apart inside a quiet house in Ibadan. Remy, your sister called me. He laughed, but it was the ugliest laugh Remy had ever heard. Your own sister, Bose, called me. After 20 years, she called me and she told me everything. Remy closed her eyes. And Simi, Tunde whispered. His voice broke completely on the name. Simi and Bose's daughter, Lekan, they are in love, Remy. Our daughter is in love with her own blood cousin. And you are the reason. You did this. You sat in that hospital room 20 years ago and you made a choice that has destroyed everything. A single tear rolled down Remy's cheek. She did not wipe it. Tell me it isn't true, Tunde begged. He was no longer shouting. He sounded like a man drowning slowly in shallow water. But Remy had carried this secret for 20 years, and silence by now was the only language she had left. The conversation that followed was the confrontation that had been 20 years in the making. I was afraid, Remy said. It was not an excuse. She did not offer it as one. Her voice was flat and empty, like a room after the furniture has been removed. I was lying in that hospital and they were telling me she might not survive, and I could not accept it, Tunde. I could not lie there and let my child die when there was a healthy baby 2 floors below. She stopped. She pressed her palms against her thighs. I know what I did. I have known every single day for 20 years. I know there is nothing I can see. You stole Bose's child, Tunde said. Each word was separate, deliberate, like he was placing stones. Yes. The daughter I have raised for 20 years is not mine. She is yours, Remy said, and for the first time her voice cracked. You raised her, you love her. She is yours in every way that... She is not biologically, Tunde said. His voice was very quiet now. And Bose's child, Lekan, she is ours, our blood. And our daughter, our biological daughter, is in love with her. He laughed again, that ugly, broken laugh. Do you understand what you have caused? Do you understand the full shape of this disaster? Remy understood. She had understood for a long time. She just had not known the disaster would take exactly this shape. You need to go, Tunde said. Remy looked up. I cannot be in this house with you right now. I cannot look at you. You need to go to your mother's house tonight and you need to stay there until I figure out what I am going to do. Tunde, Remy, he said her name like a door closing. Go. She went. The family meeting happened 4 days later. It was Mama Adeleke who insisted on it. Mama Adeleke who called everyone together in her sitting room in Bodija with the authority of a woman who had held this family through every storm it had ever faced and was not about to let it drown now. Tunde came. Bose came. Without Kunle, who was too angry to sit in the same room as Remy yet. Remy came, quieter than anyone had ever seen her. Simi did not come. She did not know what the adults were gathering to discuss. Mama Adeleke opened the meeting by placing both her hands flat on her thighs and looking at Remy the way only a mother can look at a child who had failed in a profound and irreversible way. "Tell them everything," she said, "from the beginning." And Remy did. She told it simply and without self-pity, the way a confession should be told. The fear, the hospital corridors, the 3 in the morning decision, the switched tags, the 20 years of silence. She did not cry until she reached the part about Lekon, about watching her biological daughter grow up across town and attending her graduation and clapping for her achievements. And then she cried without trying to stop, without covering her face, with the raw, ugly grief of someone finally, irrevocably found out. Bose sat across the room and did not speak. She had said her piece to Tunde. She had nothing left to add. She sat with her arms folded across her chest and her eyes wet and her jaw tight. And Remy looked at her sister and saw something she had never seen in Bose's face before, a complete and total absence of warmth. It was worse than rage. It was the look of a woman who had loved deeply and been betrayed at the deepest possible level. "You took my child," Bose said finally, when Remy finished. Her voice was very steady. "You took her from the hospital. You let me raise a child who was not mine. You let me love her and form her and build my life around her, and all this time you knew. All this time you sat across from me at Christmas and looked me in the eye, and you knew." "I know," Remy said. "You knew and you said nothing. I know." "Why?" Bose's voice finally broke on the word. "Why? Why didn't you just come to me? Why didn't you trust me? I am your sister. We could have found another way. We could have..." She stopped. She pressed her lips together. "Was my child's life worth so little to you? Was I worth so little?" The question sat in the room like a living thing. Remy had no answer for it, not a real one. The hardest part of the meeting was not Bose's anger or Tunde's silence. It was Mama Adeleke's face, the face of a woman processing the information that her older daughter had committed a wrong so deep that the ordinary tools of family and prayer and time might not be enough to fix it. "We have to tell the children," Tunde said. Everyone in the room already knew this, but hearing it said aloud made it real in a new way. "Together," Mama Adeleke said. "We tell them together." They told Simi first. Tunde brought her home from campus and sat her down in the sitting room where the yellow envelope had been, and he told her quietly and carefully from the beginning everything. Simi listened without interrupting. She was her mother's daughter that way, the capacity for absolute stillness when something was too large to react to immediately. She sat and she listened, and she asked 1 or 2 quiet questions, and she let her father finish. Then she was silent for a very long time. "So, Lekon," Simi said finally, "is not my cousin." "No," Tunde said. "She is my sister. Biologically, yes." Another silence. Outside, the compound was loud with the usual evening sounds. Children playing, a radio somewhere, a woman calling her husband to come and eat. And the girl Bose raised, the one I thought was Lekon. Her name is still Lekon, Tunde said. She is still Bose's daughter in every way that love makes a person your child. But biologically, she is your sister too. She came from your mother and me. Simi pressed her hands over her face. She sat like that for a long time. When she took her hands away, her eyes were dry, but the expression on her face was one Tunde had never seen from her daughter. A kind of devastated clarity. The face of someone watching their entire understanding of their own life rearrange itself. "Does Lekon know?" she asked. "Not yet. You are being told first." Simi nodded slowly. Then she said, very quietly, "I need to go to her." "Simi, she is going to need someone when she finds out, Daddy. She is going to need someone who loves her." She stood. "I know it's not the same kind of love now. I know everything is different. But she is still the person I know. She is still my..." She stopped. Her voice almost failed her. She straightened it firmly. "She is my sister, and I am going to go and be with her when she finds out." Tunde looked at her daughter, this girl he had raised, this girl whose biology was not his, but whose character was built from 20 years of his love and Remi's. This girl who, in the middle of her own devastation, was thinking about someone else's devastation. And he felt something shift in his chest that was not forgiveness yet, not anything close, but was something. He let her go.
The months that followed were not clean or easy. Nothing about this kind of wound is clean or easy. Anyone who tells you otherwise has not lived through one. Tunde and Remi separated. He moved to his brother's flat while he tried to figure out what remained of his marriage, what remained of his ability to look at his wife and see someone he recognized. Remi stayed in the family home and went to her shop every day and came back to a quiet house and sat with what she had done in the way that people must sit with things when there's nowhere left to run. Bose and Kunle struggled. Kunle, who had known nothing, moved through the early weeks in a kind of numb fury that was partly directed at Remi and partly directed at the impossible situation itself. His daughter, the girl he had raised, loved, built a relationship with, was not biologically his or Bose's, but she was his daughter. She had been his daughter for 20 years. He sat with Lekon one evening, the week after she was told, and he said simply, "I do not care about biology. You came from me. Do you understand? Whatever came before or after the hospital, you came from me." Lekon held her father's hands and said nothing, but she did not let go. Lekon's adjustment was the hardest to watch. She was 19 years old, the same age as Simi, born just days apart in the same hospital, and she had just been told that everything she knew about herself was built on a lie. Not a lie she told, not a lie anyone who loved her told, but a lie nonetheless. She grieved it the way you grieve a death, in waves, with good days and terrible days, and moments where she thought she had moved past it only to find it waiting for her around the next corner. She was angry at Remi, deeply, specifically, personally angry. She came to the house once, 3 weeks after everything broke open, and stood in the sitting room where Remi received her in silence. "I do not hate you," Lekon said. "I want to, but I do not. Because I look at what you did, and I understand. I do not forgive it, but I understand that you are a woman who was terrified and made the worst possible choice." She paused. "But I need you to know that there is a me who should have grown up in this house. There is a life I should have had that I did not have, and you cannot give that back to me. No one can." Remi sat very still. "I needed you to hear that," Lekon said. "I needed to say it to your face. That is all I came for." She left.
Remy sat alone in the sitting room for a long time afterward. Then she went to her bedroom and knelt down beside her bed the way Mama Adeleke had taught her when she was small, and she prayed. Not for forgiveness. She did not feel entitled to ask for that. She prayed simply for the grace to carry what she had done without destroying what was left. Simi and Lekan found their way, slowly and painfully, to something new. What they had felt for each other did not disappear the way Simi had hoped it might, dissolved cleanly by the revelation of the truth. Feelings are not logical. They do not reorganize themselves to match new information on demand. For several months, Simi grieved the relationship she had thought she was building, grieved it quietly and privately, and Lekan did the same on her side. But underneath the grief was something else. A genuine bond, a real recognition of each other that did not depend on how it had begun. They had found each other before they knew the truth. They had chosen each other, independently of biology or family. And when the romantic dimension closed, what remained was something that surprised them both, a friendship so deep and specific that it felt to both of them like the real thing they had been moving towards all along. Sisters, though neither of them had a simple word for what they were to each other. They spoke on the phone almost every day. They visited each other. They built something, carefully and honestly, out of the ruins of everything that had come before. It was not perfect. There were difficult conversations, misunderstandings, moments where the weight of everything nearly crushed the fragile thing they were constructing. But they built it anyway, because that is what people who refuse to be defeated by what was done to them do. Tunde returned home after 4 months. He came back not because he had forgiven Remy, not fully, not yet, but because he had spent 4 months in his brother's flat asking himself what he believed about people and mistakes, and the difference between who someone was and what they had done. He thought about the woman he had married. He thought about 20 years of evidence, the patience, the care, the love that was real, even when the circumstances around it were built on something terrible. He thought about his daughter, who was navigating a situation no 19-year-old should have to navigate, and doing it with a grace that could only have come from a home that, in some real way, had built her well. He came home with a single sentence. "I do not know if I can forgive you fully," he told Remy, standing in the doorway, "but I am willing to try." Remy looked at him. This man who cried at her wedding, this man who held her hand through the contractions and the fear and the long dark nights, this man she had lied to for 20 years and who was standing in her doorway choosing to try. She did not tell him she deserved it. She did not. She said quietly, "Come in, I will make dinner." He came in. The hardest reconciliation was between Remy and Bosse. It took the better part of a year, and it did not look anything like the reconciliations in the movies. No dramatic moment of tearful embrace, no single conversation that fixed everything. It happened in increments so small they were barely visible. A phone call that lasted 10 minutes instead of the terse 2-minute exchanges they had been managing, a family gathering where they sat near each other and did not move away, an evening when Mama Adeleke sat them down together and said nothing, only made them sit and be in the same room and breathe the same air, because she was wise enough to know that sometimes presence is the first step back to each other. The moment that cracked it open was ordinary. Bosse called Remy on a Thursday afternoon in November, almost a year after everything had happened. She called for nothing important, a fabric seller in Bodija who had moved stalls, a question about a cousin's engagement gift, practical, small things. Remy answered the questions carefully. There was a long pause. Then Bosse said, "How are you?" Not in the polite, deflecting way, in the real way, in the way she used to ask before. Remy held the phone and felt something in her chest that had been rock hard for 12 months begin incrementally to ease. "I am not well," she said honestly. "I am getting through." "Yes," Bosse said. "Me too." They talked for 40 minutes. They did not discuss the past. They talked about their children, their mother, the small currents of ordinary life. When Bosse said goodbye, there was something in her voice that had not been there since the yellow envelope arrived. Not warmth yet, not quite, but the distant precursor to it, the memory of warmth. Remy put down the phone and sat in the quiet. She knew, with the clear-eyed knowledge that had always been both her gift and her curse, that it would take a long time before Bosse was fully her sister again. Maybe they would never get completely back to what they were. Maybe that was the cost, one of the many costs of what she had done. But the call had happened. Bose had called, and Remy, who had spent a year staring at the full and permanent price of her choices, understood that this small ordinary phone call about a fabric seller was in its own way a kind of grace that she had not earned and did not deserve, and was deeply, humbly grateful for. Simi graduated from UI 2 years later. The entire family came. Tunde and Remy together, Bose and Kunle, Mama Adeleke, who cried from the moment they parked the car, Lekon, who drove down from Abuja where she was now working. They sat together in the crowd and watched Simi walk across the stage in her gown and accept her certificate, and she looked out at them afterwards and smiled, a smile that held all of it, the complicated joy of a life that had been broken and was being rebuilt, piece by piece, imperfectly, honestly. Remy looked at Simi's face and thought about a hospital room 22 years ago, about a woman who had been terrified and chosen wrong. She thought about the enormous cost of that choice, not just to herself but to everyone around her. She thought about what it meant to love someone enough to steal for them, and how love, twisted by fear and desperation, could become the instrument of damage. She thought about the daughter she had raised and the daughter she had given away, and the strange, broken, complicated grace that had allowed both of those daughters to grow into women who were choosing, despite everything, to be whole. She could not undo what she had done. That was the permanent truth of it. There was no gesture large enough, no apology sufficient, no amount of time that would fully erase it. She had taken something from Bose that could not be returned. She had built her family on a foundation of fear and deception. She had stolen a child's story from her and given her a different one. She would carry that for the rest of her life. But she was carrying it upright now, in the open, without hiding, and standing in the sunlight watching her daughter receive her degree, surrounded by the imperfect, damaged, still-standing family that her choices had made. Remy thought that perhaps this was what redemption actually looked like. Not a clean slate, not forgiveness that erased the record, just the choice made every day to live honestly with what you had done and to do better and to show up for the people you had hurt for as long as they would allow you to do. It was not enough, but it was what she had. And for the first time in 22 years, she was no longer hiding from it. The moral of this story is that not that desperate people should not be forgiven. It is that fear, when we let it make our choices for us, does not protect us from loss. It only spreads the loss further, wider, deeper, until it touches everyone around us. Remy was desperate, and she reached for control in a moment of powerlessness, and the cost of that reach fell on 4 people who did not choose to pay it. Choose honesty, even when you are terrified, especially when you are terrified.
If you enjoyed this story, please don't forget to subscribe to African Tales by Judith. Like this video and share it with your friends and family. Comment down below and tell us what you think. And tell us where you are watching from. We really would love to know. Also, we want to ask you, if you were Bose, could you ever truly forgive your sister for what she did? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. Until next time, remember that the truth, no matter how long you bury it, always finds its way back to the surface. Take care of yourselves and each other. Goodbye.